Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our podcast. This is a 25-year look across the spectrum. This podcast is with me, Kelly Birmingham, chronicling and drawing from my now 28 years working in the field with autism and developmental disabilities. And with me, as always, is my partner in crime, Jen Lucero, mom to Dylan and Ethan. Hi, Jen.
Hey, Kelly.
So
Sorry.
we have a few new, it's okay, we have a few new listeners on our podcast. So if you don't, I've heard people want to know, Jen is a mom who has a son, Dylan, on the autism spectrum, pretty moderately to severely impacted. And she has another son, Ethan, who has been a tremendous advocate and sibling for him. And we've done several podcasts with Ethan, and we have more to come. So before we get started on today's podcast, I always have to give a shout out to our amazing sponsor, which is Cite Pro. And Cite Pro offers a wide range of engaging and practical continuing education courses developed by BCBAs for BCBAs. You can visit their website at citepro.com to see their complete CEU library, including our podcasts, which people can listen to while you're driving around or at home, or you can go onto our YouTube channel and get free CEUs, which never happens anymore. So thank you to Cite Pro. All right, Jen, today's topic, I cannot wait to hear your opinion on this, okay? So there is a movement that's happening called parent-led ABA. And I want to explain this a little bit before I ask you your thoughts on this topic. So in the history of ABA, for our podcast listeners, the 1986, I can't remember, 86, 87, let me look, LOVA study that really became the study that said, yes, ABA is an effective strategy for working with children and adults on the autism spectrum. A lot of those hours were parent-led, right? So the parents did a chunk of those direct hours with their kids in addition to being at the clinic. So let me see. So the parent doing some of the work has always been a part of ABA. If you look at other models, like I am trained and certified in the Early Start Denver model for an early intervention program, a lot of that, the parents are trained to continue and do the work outside of therapy with their children. They're considered part of the model. Insurances companies right now require most ABA companies to include, they call it parent training. At Easter Sales, we call it caregiver education and support, require families to participate because the goal has always been not having ABA for life, but empowering families to feel in control of their child and how to manage their child's behavior. So that's nothing new. However, since the pandemic and the Great Resignation, there's been this, like, we all know, because of Dylan and his, Dylan going to his day program, there's a shortage of workers. We cannot find job coaches, right? I mean, you've experienced turnover. We can't find people to do the 101 ABA. We can't find people to do respite, right? There's just not enough people, right? Like, how many turnovers have you had in the last 2 years?
Oh, a ton, especially for respite. Yeah. And
Right?
job coaches. Yeah.
So this, right? I mean, it's just turnover. No one can keep people. Of course, sidebar, if the wages were better, I mean, sorry, the wages for the employers, because if the reimbursement rates were higher, this probably wouldn't be an issue, but let's not do that. Let's not raise wages, right?
Absolutely.
Let's not have insurance funders pay more for the very people that are needed. Anywho, so there's this new movement that's called parent-led ABA. And there's sort of, and I'm reading and people are wondering, and I'll put this article in the session notes. It is from Behavioral Health Business Wire that I follow their articles. I really like that they write a lot on the latest trends. And so I'm drawing from an article that they put out January 9th, 2024. And they interviewed a bunch of people. And so they interviewed some folks and some parents that are pushing for this. And some of their quotes are, parents are desperate, right? We're desperate to get the help. And so in this movement, parents are supporting the idea, and there's two components to this, that companies and BCBAs train parents fully to become basically registered behavior technicians, which requires, and they didn't actually state RBTs, they just said behavior technicians. I would assume they mean a registered behavior technician. which requires 40 hours training at the minimum to get, and then sitting for an exam with the BACB and getting a certification. The article doesn't state that, but I'm assuming that that's what people mean when they say training parents. And then in this model, parents do the actual behavioral intervention with the child, supervised by a BCBA, right? And in some cases, the companies are hiring and paying the parents to be the behavior interventionist, and they provide the BCBA for supervision. What say you, caregiver? Now,
I was already shaking my head.
For our podcast listeners, this is just my personal opinion and one caregiver's opinion. We recognize other people are going to have different opinions. We're just drawing from our own experience. Go ahead, Jen. 24 years you've been with Dylan. What say you?
I know, like, for me personally, like, I think it would be, it would have been, there's no way it would have been the worst idea ever. I mean, first of all, like when Dylan first got diagnosed, it took me a while to get him diagnosed.
Right.
I had to move back to California because that was the only place that I actually could get him diagnosed and find like proper services, including ABA. I mean, it was so hard and like awful, like, and like I needed help, but I couldn't and wouldn't want to have to like execute that and do it myself. I just think it's like the worst idea ever, like for the person too. Like I needed help. Yes, I was trained as a parent and followed through, and of course I would do as much as I could on the sidelines, but I think there's something to say about having a professional, and whatever you want to call a professional, but a person besides, like, first of all, you used to beat me up, right? You were there, you saw, and like you would say to me, like, he he takes everything out on you because he loves you and trusts you the most, and like that was hard. I'm like, oh great, or like you would tell me, like, he's, even as a kid he was like huge and like I'm small, and you'd be like, make yourself bigger. That only lasted so long, but I mean there's
I
also the
did tell you to make
component.
yourself bigger. That's
Yeah,
right.
there's a component that honestly I want to be a parent. I don't want, like, and yes, on a professional side, I was a PBI in the school district, but it's completely different when you're working with other people's, family members than your own. And there's just a psyche level of it too, of like, when, like I've worked with people with special needs, including autism now for what, almost probably like 18 years,
Yeah.
something like that. But like I found my niche, which is fundraising of all things and special events. But even though I love Dylan, and I just think it would have been a total disaster. Plus, honestly, I feel like it's a cop out, of whether it's insurance companies or like you just said, like, I think they need to pay people more to like even want to do it. Like the only people that stick around and have supported Dylan throughout the years are people that they love him, and like they do it out of the kindness of their heart because they really care about him, But I just think it's a disaster price. Sorry people, but it's just almost shocking to me,
So
you know?
yeah, so they interviewed a mom who was the owner of a company in Texas, and I recognize this point. She said, in the 90s, there weren't RBTs, behavior therapists, and we were the people doing that. We were the only people that were there. And so basically, we've been pushing for insurance coverage. We were the only ones that could do it. And so, why not get paid to do it? And let me ask you, like, why not get paid to be your child's therapist? You could make money, not a lot, obviously, but you could make money.
I don't know, there's something about it that just, it just doesn't feel right, I also don't wanna, I don't know, it sounds weird, but I don't wanna, like, I don't wanna, I don't know how to say it. I don't wanna profit off of, having to try to help my son, like, through his challenges. Like, I found out my niche, and like, it did change the direction of my life and career by Dylan, getting diagnosed with, moderate to severe autism, and, took me in a different direction. I mean, I was a designer, like,
Yeah.
for Disney before. But, and then honestly, I don't want to do that 24/7.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think and I don't think they even will realize it, but, I think that it's too stressful to, you have to have like something besides autism in your life, or behaviors or whatever, that you, I mean, it's kind of like Ethan, like my other son, like, I always made sure that he had like all his own stuff, and
Mhm.
and though he was very much a part of the team and always helping and working to support Dylan and us, like I was so protective of him, and like that, his stress level or how it would affect him. And I think you have to think of, like, whether you not realize it or not, like, how is that really going to affect you long term too? Because, okay, I don't know if they're mainly talking like people that with young kids and it's early intervention, or if they're talking long term. But to be honest too, like, there's a certain point, I already know, like, once Dylan aged out of the school system, that like things really changed. And I felt like the demand on me was even higher.
Mhm.
So, like, you got to think of long term too. Like,
Good point.
I mean, most people, okay, what is it? 89% of people still live at home,
Mhm.
and are like, the high percentage are not employed.
You're talking about
And
folks on
so,
diagnosed with autism. Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
so it's like the long haul.
Mhm.
I feel like I'm being so like negative, but I mean, you got to think about like your own mental, like, health too, and like your own like self worth and care. Like, I honestly wouldn't want to be paid for it. If I were to do it, I would, and I did do it. Don't you think I
Yeah.
put in the hours? I
Yeah, you
mean,
did.
but I
Yeah.
don't feel like I should get paid for it. Maybe that's just a weird like psyche thing as a
Yeah.
mom, but I'd
So
rather go get a job. And then that might sound terrible, but I don't want to do that 24/7 with Dylan. And we spend a ton of time together. We go and do great things together, which I can totally do with him now, like going to plays and movies, and
yeah.
the beach and stuff. But I don't want it to be, we're having fun. I don't want it to be like I'm like working and trying to like mold him into something. Does that make sense?
It does. One of the quotes in this article is some think that parent-led ABA is more about helping parents use ABA to be better parents, not to become a formal part of their child's care team. Don't you agree with that?
Mm-hmm.
Like doing some of the work, learning how
Yeah.
to do it, but
Yeah.
not being the formal part of the team. And then this quote says, I don't want mothers and fathers and grandparents and brothers and sisters who lose their traditional roles in the family, right? Um, they would lose their role in the family because now they're acting as care providers.
Mhm.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, for sure. And then, okay, to step back and think about the past,
Mm-hmm.
there's also the aspect of, eh, like, if you're married or your partner or whoever, like, if you're not on the same page, and like one person thinks one way about like the behavior or what's happening, and or styling of parenting or whatever, that could actually cause more conflict for the person that is trying to have work this job and, provide the actual service.
That's a good
And
point.
then, I mean, just as a family dynamic, it just seems like it would put you in a higher stressful situation, because here you're trying to do it as a job, but then you're also, like you just said, like, what dynamic does that make you then in the household?
That's a super great point. And the stress on the marriage. And then I'm thinking if I'm the BCBA, I've certainly done tons of caregiver
Hmm.
support. I've worked with you in your home. Here's how to
Yeah.
manage this. Here's how to manage that. Taking phone calls, walked you through things. 1,000 families at this point in my career I've done this with. And the goal is always eventually, hopefully, that the child doesn't need as much. Like Dylan used to have full time,
Yeah, Dylan doesn't even have it at all
right?
anymore.
And so
Yeah.
that's the goal. But I'm thinking about like, gosh, if when Dylan was first diagnosed, let's talk about the early diagnose, like first diagnosed. Can you imagine you're dealing with, you just learned about your child's diagnosis and you're
Hmm.
dealing with all of that impact. And
Yeah.
now we're going to put you through 40 plus hours of training and we're going to pay you to be with your child 20, as the 40 hours a week, 20 hours a week, whatever, to provide the work. And I'm going to come in and supervise you and tell you how to do things. I don't know why the dynamic is off. To me, it just feels a little bit of like a dual relationship, like because I'm telling you what to do, like I'm your supervisor, right?
Hmm.
That dynamic supervisor versus supervisee feels very different to me than a BCBA supporting a caregiver. Because if you're the caregiver, you get to make the decision, right? So if I'm the BCBA and you say that's not going to work for my family, I'm going to say, okay, let's figure out a different way, right? Like planned
Hmm.
ignoring for Dylan did not work for him, right?
Yeah.
When he was becoming upset. And so we put in different strategies. But
Hmm.
what if I'm a BCBA and a fairly new BCBA to the field, and I'm telling you to do something as your supervisor, and you're saying that's not going to work for my child and my family? If right, like to me, I'm gonna like try to find a way to make it work. But if it's
Hmm.
a new BCBA and I'm telling you, hey, parent who's my RBT, I'm supervising, do it the way I told you to do it, that relationship feels like it's going to get all messed up.
Yeah, I mean, that runs into risk management and
Yep.
HIPAA and like all that stuff. And I mean, honestly, I've been lucky that I have had, especially in the school district, that, and privately, services that, I've had pretty much a good run. There's been a couple here and there, but I mean, I've been super pissed off. What about, okay, how about the aspect of how does that work then? Like, with the overall plan, and like your child has an IEP, and like you have a team, like it's not just at home, like you have a whole team, you have a medical team, you have a school-based
Right.
team, you
Yep.
probably have multiple services, like either in home or like out, like in the community or whatnot. And I've totally told people off like a lot, like never you, because we're all on the same page, but like there's been supervisors that like like we have been working on a strategy, or like you said, someone new comes in and they just like want to totally just like do like what they just learned and think is right, and I already know it's not going to work. Yeah, so if I'm reporting to that person, they're quote supervising me, like how would that work? Not only that, here's my other thing, as you know, because a lot of times the stuff that was going down with Dylan were in the middle of the night, or just
Right.
how do you turn it off? At what point, okay, are you going to pay me overtime? Because like it's it's already a 24/7 job. Like we joke at work, like when I go home, they're like, oh, have fun at your second full-time job. Like,
Right.
you know what I mean? It's never, you can't ever really turn it off.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And the thing I think about is, so in the BACB ethics code,
Mhm.
they have one's called 1.11 multiple relationships. And it says, because multiple relationships may result in a conflict of interest that might harm one or more parties, behavior analysts avoid entering or creating multiple relationships, including professional, personal, and familial relationships with clients and colleagues. We communicate the risks, and we work to immediately resolve anything. I'm not reading the whole thing, but
Mhm.
it may not be a multiple relationship if you're the RBT, I'm the BCBA, but I feel like it could be, because if I'm not honoring you as a parent and I'm treating you as my supervisee, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to teach and guide toward a certain way, and I'm not skilled enough to like manage those two things, I see that becoming real serious ethical conflict of interest problem,
Mm-hmm. No, it's true.
right?
Yeah, I don't know. I just think it's odd. And it's sad because it's like, and again, like also Dylan gets like obsessed with me, when
Yeah.
like also like you're also, I think you're like making it even more clingy. Like he does better like when he's with other people. I've always known that. But I mean, for that type of thing, for services. And we totally have a wonderful relationship, and we always have, but it's also like I want to like do fun stuff with him. I don't want to sit there and I just think can you imagine? Especially when he used to have like such aggression and tantrums. There's already like, getting taken out like every day. Like, why would I set myself up to like just because I'm getting paid for it? I just seems so weird to me. I don't know. Maybe
Well,
I'm a terrible person, but I would like that is the last job I would want.
Well, I mean, I see some value of it in certain situations. And I think like everything, this should be thought of as an individual clinical decision that happens, I think.
Mhm.
Like, and here's the other thing to think about, and how you've got to be skilled as a BCBA, because like I asked Bill this question too. He has a daughter on the spectrum,
Mhm.
Melanie, who's 33. I'm her stepmom. And she doesn't require ABA support. She lives fairly independently. We scaffold a significant amount of her independence, but she does.
Mhm.
Um, and I asked him this question, and he said, hell no, would I have wanted this when I was younger, but when she was younger. But what he did say, like kind of like what we're both saying, is I wanted the strategies. I wanted to know how to
Mhm.
handle situations. But he said there were some things that needed to come from like her school teacher. And
Yeah.
he said, and like now we still do it. Like we struggle with some of her health and her weight. And so
Mhm.
we're not effective with her at all, but her doctor is. And so we
Oh
use the
yeah.
doctor in that regard. And if we were the people, we try to do the things with her, but there's some information she just can't, that the kids just, it's better when they learn from someone else. I wish I had better research, people listening to this podcast. I'll research this and put it out there. But as a parent myself, there are just some things that our kids are going to hear from better coming from
Mhm.
someone else. And I kind of keep going back to that mentality.
But I think that's overall, like I know I've always worked with a ton of teachers, and they're always like, obviously it's so much easier to teach your own kids or get everybody else to do their homework than your own kid.
Right.
Is this just for is it seems like new, but is this mainly for parents, or like is this like just a parent thing, or do they look at even like grandparents or like siblings or anything like that, or is this
It depends. Like I started noticing the trend on LinkedIn and people talking
Mhm.
about it. And then when this article came out, I started really looking at, because there's an agency in California that's named in the article that's doing it. That
Mhm.
they're in San Francisco and they are hiring families and they're the primary provider. They're the behavior therapist. And they even, and then there's another company that's doing it. And they said, we don't have cancellations, right? There's no call outs because the parent's always there.
Because they're pinned down by the kid right now and they can't get up.
Interesting. We're in California. Our California ABA Association came out against this as well.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean people can't do it. It's not illegal. People can do it. But my
Mhm.
state governing body came out against it. And it was interesting because they say, they talk about, they talk about the ethics. They talk about basically that the RBT position, it's only been around since 2013. I think I had that date
Mhm.
right.
Yeah.
And it came about because there was a need for people.
Yeah.
Insurance law has passed and they needed people to
Mhm.
do the work. And instead of families having to do it, this certification came about, right? To train people to do it. And that it was an ongoing profession. and that it requires, because if you're an RBT, you also require a certain amount of supervision
Mhm.
and review of your work. And
Mhm.
in order to maintain your credentials, the RBT supervisor must record and comply with requirements, the nature, frequency, and the supervision, as well as apply to the ethical standards. And they basically talk about the concern about the ethical standards in this model.
What about like taking, the data and like reporting and
The
stuff? Do
pa-
they have to do all that as well?
Yep, that the parent would take the data and the
Mhm.
parent would do everything that your behavior interventionist or RBT might do.
Mhm.
And so they also came out, the Cal ABA Association was really on it, and they talk about California laws and the role of parents. And in this summer, our board, the BAC board, came out and said they made it clear that the parent RBT service delivery model is prohibited because it violates several standards in the ethics codes, as well as the RBT ethics, and that parent RBTs and their supervisors who participate in such a model are at risk of being reported, and they strongly
Yeah, I was gonna say, what about mandating reporting and like if I just feel like that puts like everybody at risk, mandating reporting. What about like if you're in the school and they like, you have to have certain things in place. Like, for example, if you have, a BIP or if you have like a Hughes bill, all that stuff, like how does that work when it's like the parent and then you're like doing this at home?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's interesting because while I understand the parents, like the mom in
Mhm.
Texas who's there are some that are paying families and some that are not. But in general, the parent is the primary behavior interventionist out of necessity because they don't have enough people. And while I certainly understand that, I don't know that this is the answer from my opinion.
Pay people
Um,
more.
exactly.
I mean, I remember they were hiring at my son's adult day program when we were trying to get him in full time, which took forever.
Yep.
And literally like a block down the street, they built a new Chick-fil-A and a new In and Out, and it was like starting at like probably $5 an hour more
Yep.
or more at a fast food restaurant than they were paying the job coaches. And they were wondering why like they were so much turnover and just like no one was. I mean, they were even trying to give like little like, start bonuses and stuff, but it's like if you're gonna pay someone minimum wage and it's a hard job,
It's a hard
like,
job.
why like it just doesn't even make sense. And like, yeah, and the retention, how do you expect to retain like employees and then what it also like room for growth of just, professional development? Because pretty much most people that would do this are probably in school,
Right.
and like getting trained in the field or to either, do some to become a BCBA or like, or whatever, or something else. But yeah, I mean, it just seems, and then how long can you keep doing it too?
Right.
Like, I my kid's 24. Like, I mean, I could see too. I mean, that's why I'm just interested too. Like, as they pursue this, like, are you talking like someone just diagnosed? There's so many weird ranges too, like in
Yep.
this cycle of, you know, developing, living on the spectrum. Like, there's so many waves and like so many, different stages of this journey that maybe at some point it could have been somewhat of a good idea, but certainly not in the beginning, and certainly not as they're older, because then also that making them even more dependent on you, because like if the goal is, my goal is always making Dylan, even though he's going to need assistance the rest of his life, making him, my our main goals are community, self-care, learning like to be as independent as possible. But how do you do that if you're like with that person the whole time and you're still the parent? I just don't get it. But
Yeah, I think I think Providing caregiver support to manage certain
Mhm.
parts and aspects of their life, absolutely. But putting the pressure on the parent to be the sole deliverer of services, my personal opinion in my 28 years, I can see some scenarios for it, but I feel like it needs to be a very specific individual clinical decision that's made, and it's not the best way for our field to go forward. I'm
Yeah.
glad we aligned.
Yeah, of course. Always.
I know. I wasn't sure about that one. Well, thank you everyone for listening to our podcast. We'll have notes. I'll have articles and things in about this in our session notes. And thanks as always, Jen.
Thanks, Kelly.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.